Hello, everyone. Welcome to my second episode for my podcast, Behind the Injury. Today, I interviewed my uncle, Dave Penake, and I feel like this episode is very interesting because he talks about the different mental challenges he had to go through, the different physical challenges he had to go through. He gives advice, and I think this episode will be very interesting and very beneficial. Please enjoy. Alrighty, so thank you for taking this time to let me interview you. So my first question is, how many ACL injuries have you had?
Well, I've had more than ACL. I've had PCLs too, and I've had 3 ACL injuries and a PCL injury.
Okay, so quite a lot. Been through it a few times. Do you remember like how they happened, or like how like did you like know when?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first one. I was just playing like backyard football, got tackled weird, and that was like the first one. After that, they were always like not super exciting. You know, they were like shooting a basketball, running, like cutting like nothing big. And after the first one, I like always knew. Like I think it was my second or third one. I did it working out. I was staying in Minnesota, and Uncle Mike was living there. And we were going to go watch the new Star Wars movie that night. And I was like, went to work that day, came back. I was like, summer internship. And then, went and did my punting and kicking and stuff, and just was like going through warm-ups and pop. Like I didn't even follow. I was like, oh my God. And it totally ruined the movie. But it was,
Rescheduled.
So I always knew after that. I always knew. Every kind of injury I've had after that, I was like, okay.
Yeah. What was your first surgery like? Because I know that the surgeries have definitely changed. So I just wanted to know what your first one was like.
Yeah, for my first surgery, actually, not a lot of doctors were doing PCLs at the time, and I'm super old. And we finally found someone who actually would do the surgery, and I think I was like his third. And so like it was a pretty uncommon thing at the time. But you know how like now you do an ACL and like they have you moving, like they have you weight bearing as soon as possible, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because of the mechanics of the knee, they, at least at the time, they may have improved it since, but they couldn't do that with PCLs. And so I had a surgery, and then I was put in essentially like a cast for 3 months with my legs straight. And so I couldn't ever bend it for the first like 3 months after surgery. And it was like totally depressing. And from a rehab standpoint, it really slowed it down. And so you lost all your muscle. And then when they took the cast off, I remember I was so excited, and I could bend it like from here to like there.
Yeah.
And it was like so painful. So it took a while, but I hope they've improved that since.
Yeah, because I know when I tore my ACL, they wanted me within 24 hours to go into this like machine that had you like bend. Had you like bend like 40 degrees, 45. They wanted me in that as soon as possible. After.
Yeah, so on my last surgery they had that.
Yeah.
But prior to that, none of them did. Mm-hmm. And then and even though ACLs, they let you move it and put some weight on it, where the PCL they didn't.
Yeah.
All that stuff was coming out. Did you have one of those like cooling pump cups? Like that was like a new thing, like the cooler that it pumps cold water.
Oh yeah.
Like a new thing that wasn't there the first time.
Yeah, that ice machine was a lifesaver.
It's
like
awesome.
we had one, and then I remember when my friends tore their ACL, literally just donating it. Like, it went around in like a circle. Like, 5 people used it. And it was like, but I mean, it helped everyone like so much. What have you learned from your past recoveries? What have you taken away from each of them?
I don't want to get injured again. Is number one. I think number two, like, from recovery standpoint, it's like you got to do your physical therapy.
Yeah.
Like you've like got to take it seriously, and if you don't take it seriously, like you're never going to get better. I worked really hard at mine, and I still I don't have full motion in my knees and all that stuff. Like, I've definitely lost quite a bit there. The other thing is to try not to gain a lot of weight. I went through one of those cycles. That wasn't great. And then I think the last thing I would say is, when these were happening, I was playing football, mm-hmm. and they had me putting on a lot of weight, like muscle mass and stuff, not just like fast food, weight, Publix fried chicken weight. That was a different time. And I spent a lot of time in the weight room, got strong, all that stuff. And I've kind of become a believer that, our bodies are sort of made for only so much strength. Mm-hmm. And so, my view is that, a big part of the reason I kept getting injured was because I was probably improperly strong, or they didn't have the sophistication of how to do it properly. So, all sides are strong and you're kind of well balanced. Because I think that was a big part of what caused my, bladder injuries, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's really good to know. So how have your injuries impacted your life now? I know you talked about how you don't have full mobility, but I was just wondering if there's any more
Yeah, I can't run anymore. So after I had all those, I also had a number of cartilage injuries and stuff, and so I just don't, I bike now. I love biking, so it's that's fine. I think, for me in hindsight, I'm a competitive person, and I just was I'll get through this and I'll go, you'll get fixed or whatever. And I think it's not so simple. I think every time something happens, you lose a little bit, and you kind of, do you regret not stopping soon? I knew I wasn't going to play in the NFL pretty early. I don't know why I kept going at it. And so that, I think that's something. But I'd say the last thing, the probably best thing, is that I had some tough times and I got through them, and I had great friends that helped me through them, and a family that did, and your dad was awesome most of the time. He was terrible some of the time, but I think what you're talking about doing here is good, because if you get through this, and everyone can, mm-hmm. You can be stronger. And there are very few things I experience in my day-to-day life that are harder than doing rehab the right way. I think it probably brought some good perspective to life. Mm-hmm. Along with it, some depression and all these things, the challenges that you go through. Mm-hmm. But if you have a community like what you're trying to build, I think it could be really valuable to these folks.
Yeah. And then I have 2 more questions. What were some of the mental challenges that you had to face when you were recovering?
Yeah, my life, I defined my life by my athletics. Mm-hmm. And so, even though there were lots of different pieces of me, that's how I thought of myself as an athlete. Mm-hmm. And that was really hard, because it's gone. It's disappears one day, and you know that experience, yeah. Right? And so I think for me that was I got depressed. It was actually worse in college than it was in high school for me, but it was mentally really tough, and physically tough and just painful and, like all that stuff. So I think for me that the biggest stuff is really the mental aspect of it, trying to learn how to define yourself.
Yeah.
And I think, it'd be great if people knew that they were more than just like a one-dimensional thing, because I don't feel like I knew that, and it took me a long time to figure that out.
Yeah. That was definitely something similar that I had to go through when I did mine.
Yeah.
Although, the physical therapy and the, strength training, and all of that to get back is hard, it's not as hard as, the mental part. Because sometimes you're just am I ever going to get back? And you will, but it definitely, that's definitely a mental hurdle that I know I went through, and a lot of my friends that also did this went through, so.
Yeah. Well, I went through it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's way harder mentally than physically, but you're not going to get through it physically unless you're mentally prepared to accept what you have to go through.
Yeah.
To get through the physical part too, right?
Yeah.
And so, in some ways, maybe, defining myself as an athlete helped me to say, I got to get this done, I got to get it done right. But at the same token, it completely shattered, my world, right?
Yeah.
And the people I was with and what I did, and, it was tough.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the last question is, what is some advice you would give someone going through the same thing?
Going through recovery after an injury?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say find people who treat you well,
Mm-hmm.
right, that you want to be around. I'd find some other hobby to spend your time doing, or school or whatever, because I think if you're just sitting around wishing you were playing soccer or whatever sport you might want to do, that's tough. And then I would set goals. You really do need to do rehab, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to commit to that. And if you don't, it'll just never get better. And we've all seen people who have had older people or whatever, more often than not, like grandparents, for example, who haven't recovered well from orthopedic injuries, and it doesn't come back, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're fortunate enough to be able to actually do that and get it back, by the time you're in your 40s and 50s, you can still be active, and I think that's super important.
Yeah.
It feels really far away when you're 15.
Yeah. The process is long, but somehow it feels like it's fast but long at the same time. It's definitely interesting. Well, that was all my questions. Thank you so much for taking the time to let me ask you these questions for my podcast and my project. So, yeah. Thank you.
Well, good luck.
Thank you.
I think I'm a better person because I went through it,
Mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's life.
Yep.
That's how you do it, right? You figure out, you make the most of it, and you move on.
Yep. Just gotta go with the flow sometimes.
Exactly.